You're listening to the Desert Moon Hockey Podcast with Matt and Rich. Welcome back to Desert Moon Hockey Podcast. This is first ever draft bust in this team's history. Matt, would you like to do us the honors on who that would be?
Fucked. Or as Richie would probably say, go fuck yourself. Good luck trying to censor that one, buddy.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tricky one right there. But so episode 37 is Dan Foch, and he was drafted, what was it, 11th overall?
11th overall, the Coyotes' first ever draft selection as a member of the Coyotes. Also, my first ever draft bust video. That's a shameless plug right there. But enough about a draft bust. We actually have a guest today. Richie is just disrespectful, doesn't even acknowledge it. Look, I know he's easy to forget. I get it. But we have the man, the myth, the one who Audie called the Calgary, Arizona Coyotes simp, Mike Gould.
Welcome to the pod.
That's pretty good. Thanks y'all for having me. Appreciate it.
Would you like to shamelessly plug yourself real quick here at the beginning of this?
Boy, okay, plugs at the beginning. I dig it. I write for Daily Faceoff, which is basically Frank Saravalli's big boy. We're just over at dailyfaceoff.com, I think. I did a series where I came down to Arizona at the end of October and the beginning of November. That was a lot of fun. I went to the first 2 games at Mullet, talked to pretty much everybody there. It was a good time. Ryan Reeves told me that he thought the dressing rooms were poo-poo. That was a real quote. Hopefully the new ones are a little bit better. I'm excited to see the pictures of the annex when it's built. I do some stuff all around the place here in Calgary. I do a bunch of broadcast stuff from the AJHL, different leagues, just play-by-play, that sort of stuff. Do some Canada West with the Dinos, our CIS team here in Calgary, one of our CIS teams in Calgary. Yeah, no, it's just a busy time, especially as we enter the holiday season for me, and happy to take some time off to do something a little bit more fun sometimes.
Right, so essentially, just before Richie takes us to the boring route, anything that's said in this podcast is backed up by an official source. We have a real journalist and hockey insider here. So I say that Shane Gould is personally financing the Tempe Arena. That is fact. That is certified fact today.
That's definitely not the case.
You are not allowed to call me an insider or anything like that. That is not true. I'm just here to have some fun.
Well, before we get into our more recent, in the week topics, I would like to just kind of quickly go over what was your kind of experience at the Mullet. Being, were you born in Canada or did you move there? Or I don't really know too much about you.
Yeah, I've always been in Calgary for the most part, with the exception of a couple of years that I went to school in Ottawa. I've been around. I've seen a few NHL arenas. I've seen the Saddle quite a lot. I've been to Canadian Tire Center in Ottawa quite a bit. Done Rogers in Vancouver. Been to Washington D.C. see their arena. Mullet was crazy. It was wild. I enjoyed it a lot. Just as a unique, different type of experience, short-term experience. I have concerns in terms of its lasting impact, but for what it was on the first weekend that I was there, it was unreal. It was so cool. I've never seen anything like it. I'm trying to come back in February when the Flames go down there. I'm seeing if I can swing a trip down there again, because it was really neat, and I think it will have appeal as sort of a destination type venue, like we see with Vegas, where people go to Vegas and they go there for a couple days, they gamble a little bit, and then they go see a Knights game at T-Mobile. I think Mullet, in a similar respect, with the tickets being a little bit more prestigious to get, I suppose, and just it being such a unique atmosphere, because I really do think it delivers on the promise of being a unique atmosphere. I think it'll be a driver. I think people will come down to see it. I know I'm coming down to see it again. So that was just my takeaway.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts on the Mark Scheifele chant that was very audible throughout the arena?
Yes. Yeah. Well, you saw it even with the Rangers too. I mean, they it would there. I don't think it'll change from when it was at Gila River, where I think it'll be a back and forth of fans for sure. I mean, we see it in Calgary too. We just had the Canadians in town the other night, and that was, it was half Montreal fans, half Calgary fans. It's not. I think Arizona maybe gets a bad rap sometimes, that being the only place where that happens. And I mean, when you have big, notable opposing fan bases, really, I think in almost any NHL arena, whether it be an original six team or a Canadian team, and they come in, I think you're going to see that. And it was notable in Arizona for sure. It was noticeable, but it didn't really bother me. I thought it was fun. I liked it.
Yeah,
New York travels very well in general. Fan
that
lives in Arizona.
yeah. The original six teams definitely travel well. I do agree with you completely. I think that the novelty will wear off after year 3. Now, whether they can continue to get people in with those ticket prices, we'll see. I actually did a little breakdown. I have it on my Twitter pinned, where I actually currently they make just about the same in ticket revenue as they did in Gila River. Now, that's not adding all the food costs and things like that, because that you make a lot of your profits there, and obviously having 3 times as many people to feed, you're not going to make nearly as much profit off of the food concourse and stuff like that.
Is that why the burger's $23?
Yeah, could be.
Well, burger and fries,
20,
but
$23 American. That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah,
that's like $30 up here.
Yeah, so
pay $30 for a burger.
So I'm gonna shift this course here. I'm gonna go with the more recent topic, and that's that the Coyotes are going to be playing the Flames in the next tomorrow, I believe it is.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah. So what are you expecting out of that game? Are you going to the game, or are you just watching it?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there at the Saddledome. I'm excited for it. First off, I'm excited to see the Flames reverse retros in person. They're cool jerseys. They wore them last night against Washington. They looked fantastic on the ice. I think they're better than anything Arizona's ever worn. So,
all right.
Hot take. That's a hot take.
I mean, I'm kidding about that, but I think they look really good.
I can back you on that one. I think the Flames got some pretty rocking jerseys, especially over the years. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'm buddies with the guy who does a lot of the jerseys for the Flames, and we play on the same hockey team, and he does a good job. He does a really good job and listens to input too. And so, there's a lot of good ideas that they've gotten there. As for the hockey, I mean, a bit of a weird team to figure out right now. They're a very old team, and so it's not so much as seeing what these guys can do as it is waiting for them to show what we know they can do. And they haven't really done that a whole lot so far. They had a good night last night. Huberdeau's had a slow start. He wasn't awesome last night, but the other guys on the team, the Mangiapane line was really good last night, which is something that we haven't seen for quite a while. Mangiapane was dominant against Washington. He had a couple of goals. He looked like himself. The comparison with Mangiapane over the years has always been sort of Connor Garland, who shoots more. And, he's just, he scored 35 goals last year. He was on pace for 15 for a while to start this year. And so him getting a couple more last night was a big deal. I'm really excited to watch the Coyotes again. I usually go every time they come up here. With Schmaltz being back, that top line has taken on another dimension lately. Against the Canucks last night, I thought they were really good. Clayton Keller looks like himself. It's amazing how little rusty he has shown since he's come back. Tournier had that comment about him, maybe being a little bit slower at the start of the year. I didn't see it. I thought he was fantastic right off the hop. I also think I think it was necessary that they gave Nick Ritchie the night off yesterday. He's been pretty slow of late, and I really think they should keep Michelli and Gunther in the lineup at the same time going forward, because it just gives them so many more things that they can do. It just gives them so much more skill, so many more reasons to actually watch, because I just find them to be such watchable, entertaining players. Whereas the Coyotes in general, you want to watch and see Michelli. You don't want to see Zach Kassian so much.
As much as Bill Armstrong's trying to make a physical team, Zach Kassian, Leon O'Brien, and I think it's Fisher all on the same line is it's only so fun for so long before you start noticing the defensive mistakes.
Fun when you put it out there as a starting lineup and say, hey, go try to hit Connor McDavid a couple times. Go try to hit a skilled player a couple times. Then get off the ice.
Yep.
You don't need them to turn around and score 3 on you right now.
Yeah, I think we see it sort of in Calgary with what Milan Lucic is doing these days. He just has not been an NHL player this year, which is a shame. He's once very good for this team. And I think every team in the league has its variation of that player, maybe with the exception of Colorado. But even then, when they won the cup, they had Jack Johnson and they had Darren Helms. So, it's just what you see in today's NHL. There are glue guys in the locker rooms, and it's just there's dynamics at play. But with the Coyotes, it's funny how they always use Liam O'Brien as one of their marketing tools, and with the beard, Craig Morgan always reporting on it. It's funny. I don't mind him being in the lineup.
Yeah.
It's just I mind it when there are so many of that type of player. And it's almost to the point where I'd rather see like Nate Smith or somebody like that just come up and play a couple games or something like that.
You're talking to the biggest Nate Smith stan here, okay? I talked all about him in the preseason. I'm still surprised he's down in the AHL right now.
He's also not playing all that well. He only has I think 3 or 4 goals as of right now. We're 3 months into the season. But also, I just want to point out that even the national reporter over here, the guy out of Calgary, is recognizing and seeing, oh wait, we have X amount of the exact same player on the team, the exact same type of player, and it doesn't really give him a whole lot to work with. Nothing against O'Brien. When I talk about players in this context, it's about them as an asset or as I see them fitting on the team. But when you have 4 Liam O'Briens in the roster in the lineup at any given time, it doesn't really give you a whole lot, and it's kind of redundant. So that's why, even if a Calgary reporter is noticing that, I'm hoping that other pundits and fans around the league are noticing the Coyotes for some reason have a fetish for the bottom 6 must be 6'3", 230 pounds, and need to punch people in the face.
I would rather almost see Michael Carcone get another run and just come up. He's been ripping it up in Tucson. I mean, Carcone, he had that stretch last year where I thought he looked like an NHL player. Came up, better than most of the energy guys that this team has. Scored some goals, has a really good shot.
NHL shot, for sure.
NHL, without a doubt. Reminds me a little bit of Ryan Lomberg, who came up in Calgary for a little bit, went to Florida, and looks like a pretty good bottom sixer there. Yeah, he's a guy who I think has earned it. We'll see, but he's just a lot of fun to watch.
Now, you got something, Richie?
No, you go.
Right,
I've been controlling.
I've noticed that you also cover the Calgary Tucson games. So the Calgary, are they the Wranglers now?
The Wranglers, yeah.
Are they playing in the Saddle Dome?
Yeah. So the American Hockey League team of the Flames has had an extensive history. They bought it in '93 and they turned it into their American League affiliate. And since then, it has played in St. John, New Brunswick. It played there for 10 years, and they won the Calder Cup in 2001. After that, they relocated to Omaha, Nebraska, and they became the Omaha Ak-Sar-Ben Knights. Ak-Sar-Ben is the word Nebraska backwards. Then from there...
Oh, no.
Yeah. From there, they relocated to a place called Quad City, which I'm pretty sure is in Illinois. And they played as the Quad City Flames for 2 years. After that, they relocated to Abbotsford, British Columbia, which is where the Canucks farm team currently plays. They had the Flames affiliate playing in Canucks territory. That didn't go very well. They were the Abbotsford Heat. Then they relocated to Glens Falls, New York for 1 season. They played as the Adirondack Flames. Then they relocated to Stockton for 6 seasons, and they played as the Stockton Heat. One of which, those seasons, they played in Calgary during the pandemic. And then they relocated up to Calgary. So they have played in, I think, 7 different cities over the last 20 years. So I understand why it's hard to keep track sometimes. But yes, going back to it, the Wranglers are very good. They're probably the best team in the American League right now. They've won 10 of the last 12. They got some of the best prospects, not in the NHL. The Flames have drafted reasonably well when they have targeted for skill instead of size. And yeah, that's, the farm team is chugging along. They're probably going to go far in the playoffs this year.
Is that a scenario like with the Barracuda and Sharks where they'll play in the NHL arena for now, but they'll get another building built, like a smaller building for them, or are they just going to stay playing in the bigger building?
We need a bigger building built. I mean, we would need the Saddledome is 40 years old. I mean, thing is, I think the Saddledome's the greatest the NHL has ever had, and it still needs to be replaced. It's going to be replaced at some point, but the powers that be, whether it be the Flames or the municipal government or whatever it is, they've really struggled to come to terms on an agreement here to replace the Saddledome. And this has been a story that's been going on for 15 years now, where they haven't been able to get it done. So before we even talk about a smaller arena going in for the Wranglers and the Hitmen, the WHL team, and the Roughnecks, the lacrosse team, they're going to need to replace the Saddledome first, and that's not even close. So yeah, I mean, I would love it. Like when the farm team played in Stockton, they played out of the 12,000 seat Stockton arena. That arena was gorgeous, but there were some concerns about maintaining the ice plant. It's also the home of the Sacramento Kings G League team, so they didn't want to really share it, I think. And yeah, but if you could bring that exact arena up to Calgary, oh man, that'd be perfect. It was gorgeous.
Right. So I've noticed, particularly you and some other Flames fans, mostly you on Twitter, talking about a specific Flames prospect. I think you know exactly who I'm referring to. Can you just tell us a little bit about this prospect and what's going on with the situation up in Calgary?
Well, Dustin Wolf is one of the best goaltenders not in the league. Yeah, that's the guy who you're thinking of, right?
No. I was saying, isn't it Phillips?
Yes, you're right. It's Matthew Phillips. Matthew Phillips is leading the American League in goals. He's leading the American League in points. He's 24. He turned 24 the end of last season. He was the Flames, one of 2 sixth-round picks back in 2016. There's a bit of disconnect between the way that he has performed in the American League and the amount he's been promoted in recent years. He just hasn't been promoted at all. He's played one NHL game, despite having led the farm team in scoring the last 3 seasons. He's 5'8". He's 160 pounds, 165 pounds. Both of those estimates are high. He's not really that heavy. But God almighty, he is a really good player. 15 goals in 20 games. He's one of the best finishers in the league. He's a career 18% finisher in the American League over more than 200 games now. So he can really put the puck in the net. Scored a goal last night on the San Diego Gulls. I don't remember who was in net. It might have been Lukas Dostal. And he just made it look easy. He had a breakaway, flipped it backhand. It was almost like the Pavel Datsyuk move where, it was the slow pitch and the shootout, but he did it during a game. It was one of the best goals I've ever seen. And he did it on the backhand. Like, it was nuts. This is a guy who's going to be a Group 6 unrestricted free agent at the end of this coming season. You guys are very familiar with that because it's the exact situation that led Michael Bunting to become a UFA and go to Toronto. And I think this could be a similar situation. This is a guy who has proven all he can in the American League. He's playing on easy mode down there right now. He has not gotten a shot in Calgary for a variety of reasons. He has been he's undersized. He's on a team. He's in an organization where the NHL team has been pretty healthy over the last few years. Even when they had their COVID outbreak, it all happened at the same time. And by the time everybody was healthy, they got back and there was no room. So, it's just been a case of bad circumstances. But it has not been a case where he hasn't done anything. He's been playing out of his mind lately. He's scored multiple points in 4 consecutive games, an 8-game point streak. And yeah, this is a guy who, when the UFA crop hits next summer, Flames can't get something done. And I don't see why he would want to sign back with them, given the opportunities he's gotten. He's going to be a guy who's on the radar for some teams, I think, because I don't know if he's going to get that shot with the Flames. I don't think Daryl Sutter's really the coach for him. So we'll see. But yeah, it's going to be one to watch.
So I get the vibe that Sutter is the kind of coach that would really love a player like Nick Ritchie, for example. So let me propose this to you. Ritchie for for that nice young prospect that they might lose as a UFA 1-for-1. What do you think?
I mean, I would rather do it than lose him for nothing. But I mean, I think the Flames have suffered in recent years by not promoting what they have internally before making these trades. Like they traded for Kelly Yarncroke and Ryan Carpenter at the deadline last year, and I didn't even dislike the Yarncroke acquisition. I just thought they should have given some of their kids a chance beforehand. I mean, they got Jacob Pelletier down there as well, who's a first-round pick. And he's one of 4 guys from the 2019 first round who hasn't played an NHL game yet. And if you looked at his AHL numbers, you would be shocked at that. He just wrapped up a stretch of 11, I think, consecutive games at the point. He's got 21 points in 19 games this year. And it's just like, why isn't this guy in the NHL yet? So, Daryl's a funny coach. I think he was a breath of fresh air when he came back to the organization a couple of years ago. He was undeniably a huge asset when they won the Pacific last year, had 111 points. This year, I've disagreed with almost every coaching decision he has made. It's been a very strange season. He constantly deploys the Lucic line in high leverage situations and plays them big minutes. Last night, I think they led the Flames in offensive zone faceoffs. It was weird.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a point where they had 6 and the Huberdeau line had 2 or something. Like, it was weird.
Wow.
Yeah, like Daryl, I don't know. He I don't even dislike him as a head coach. I just think this year he's been off. There's been something off about Daryl as the head coach, and I don't know what it is. It's a weird situation in Calgary right now. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. That's why I've been watching the Coyotes a bit more lately, because I just find them so much more interesting. I find the Flames right now, the big win last night aside, I find them to be kind of bland. Like, I don't know. I just find them to be.
It'll absolutely spice up that lineup is having the Richie to Richie connection. All right.
That's the funny thing. When they first got Brett Ritchie, they were playing him on a line with Gaudreau and Monahan, which was bizarre. That was under Jeff Ward. And Brett Ritchie, I mean, he did not endear himself to many Flames fans because it wasn't really his fault. It's just he was playing on a line he had no business being on. Last year, he had really good underlying numbers. I thought it was more of a mirage than anything, but this year he's been really good as well. Brett and Nick, I don't know if you need both of them, but I think Brett has done his job pretty well this year.
All right, so essentially for the audience, in case I was a little rambly for you, Richie for Phillips 1-for-1. It will get done, and they will just swap players and they leave Calgary tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I think you just got too much of a pipe dream going on there, Matt.
Dude, when am I not on a pipe dream? I literally am willing to trade Chikrin for Nyes 1-for-1. Test me.
I could totally see the Flames trading Matthew Phillips this year. Totally, 100%. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. No.
There you go. Heard it here first.
Yep.
I do want to point this out. This is more of a first statement or for question. What is it called? Where it's a demand, but it's supposed to be a question. I forget what they're called.
You're being hostile with the witness.
Yeah, I'm making more of a statement here. We're talking about coaching decisions, and whether you like it or dislike it, Tournier has been consistently playing 11 forward 7D, and I don't know how I feel about it, because I think this team now has like 4 or 5 too many men calls in the past like 3 or 4 games. And when you don't know what line you're on, you lead to too many men calls consistently.
That's also been a problem the entire Tournier era. And it's not even, again, I love Tournier. I think this is the coach that can win you a Stanley Cup. I think he's been perfect with the young players. But for whatever reason, there's this disconnect of we need 6 or 7 guys on the ice at a time, boys.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting study. I don't know if there's a correlation between that. That's really interesting. I had never thought of that. But the 11 forwards, 7 defense. I mean, just looking at the 7 defensemen who played last night, I don't think you need to play Josh Brown every night. But I mean, they signed him to be a guy who can, come in and not, be basically your Eric Branson type. But
you can call him a warm body. You won't hurt our feelings here.
I just like his defensive defense, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any issues with him. I mean, I guess you don't need what I'm trying to say is you don't need both Josh Brown and Pat Nemeth in the lineup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can live with having one of them. I think Juuso Valimaki has been really good. I'm really proud of him because last year was a tough year for him, being in the farm team, having some issues in terms of suffered some injuries, came back, got suspended for abusive officials, which was an incident and a half. He got in a fight with Daryl Sutter's son. Yep, when they were in the American League, which was something. You know, Valimaki is a funny player. He's never been fast. His skating stride is, I would describe it as laborious, and I don't know if you guys have noticed that too. I don't know. He's an interesting player to watch out there because I find sometimes he just looks like he's kind of dogging it sometimes, but I think it's just the way that he skates, and I think he has meshed really nicely when he's been on the pair with JJ Mosier.
Yep.
I would like to see that pairing play more. And honestly, I think he's been a big reason why JJ Mosier has been so good this year because he's been really reliable. And I don't know if I saw this coming. I know Arizona was the only team to put in a claim for him, and it's just like, you know, I think they did well. I think he'll be a guy they re-sign.
Yeah,
Well, I know with
I agree.
Moser, he was always good. Like as an overager, like I think that's why a lot of teams avoided him. But I was talking to my friend Kyle Pereira, who's also like a scout, minor like a website, not for like a team, but not to put you down, Kyle. I love you, but he's talking about Moser saying he's probably the most NHL ready prospect they drafted that year, and he was really good last year. But one thing I noticed about Valimaki is I'm not the smartest when it comes to the particulars on the ice of this is how his stride is or these little things, but I do notice that he just seems to elevate the defense. I noticed that he and Moser play well, and if Moser is already good and he has a better line mate with him, that also allows him to elevate as well because you have two good players playing instead of you're going with a Keith Yandel Zbigniew McCulloch pairing where Z has to play defenseman for two because Keith Yandel sucks.
Yeah, with JJ Moser, he was a guy who I really wanted the Flames to take going into that 2021 draft. I wrote a profile on him. I thought he was such an interesting project. I did not think he would necessarily go in the second round. I thought he was maybe going to be like a third or fourth round guy. I love the audacity of the Coyotes to take two overage guys in that second round. I thought it was with Doan obviously and with Moser, I thought it was a huge gamble, and I think it's looking pretty good at this point. Moser, I mean, he's second among that draft class in points right now. He might catch up to Cole Sillinger. I mean, that is just wild to think about. Right? And I mean, he's not necessarily the guy who you would expect to be up there because they got Dylan Gunther out of that draft too. And it's like, boy, this draft is already shaping up to be one that looks pretty special. With Josh Doan being as good as he has been with the Sun Devils, they made some really good late picks that year too. I mean, I don't know. I talked to some of my scouting friends who are in the industry, guys who work for websites just like you said, and there are guys who I know who talked about the Moser and the Doan picks when they were made, and they didn't like them very much. I thought they were interesting picks, and I think the picks that they made this year are pretty good too. I really like the guy they got out of Finland in the third round. Matika, I think his name is. I think the guys who they picked late, they got some upside. I think under this management group, their drafting has been really interesting, and I think they're building a pretty good base here. And I like all the picks that they have going forward. I think it's the right way to build. And even the guys, who they drafted under Chayka, I mean, I thought they had some really bad drafts in those years, bad drafts after 2016.
They hit on a couple,
but they're still getting some guys out of that. I mean, Michelli was a Chayka pick, and he looks really good. Like, he looks really good. I can't believe he wasn't in Dom Lashigin's Calder top 10. I mean, he's a guy who's going to be there at the end of the year, I think, because I don't know, I don't want to say this like out of trying to create hype, but if you go back to look at Matthias Michelli's track record, look at his different stuff, there's a lot of similarities between him and Johnny Gaudreau. When you just look at it, they played for the same USHL team. They had the exact same stat line in their draft years. They both scored, I think, 32 goals and 72 points in 62 games. They're both similar builds. I mean, obviously, Michelli didn't really have the same track in that he didn't go to college, but he's just, I mean, his American League numbers were outstanding for a guy of his age and his stature. And now what he's doing in the NHL, I mean, you look at how many points he's on pace for. I mean, he might not continue, but he's on pace for 66 points. And it's like, this guy is a really good player.
He's better than he has any right to be, and I've been high on him since that pick because I saw him. I want to try to get the exact words. Richie might remember how I described it, but when I was covering that draft, it was I saw a lot of similarities to like a Connor Garland, where this is the guy you're getting late that no one's really going to think much of, that probably is going to be pretty good. I just didn't think he would be this good, and I don't think he has any business being as good as he's been this year. But hey, I will take it, and I will not complain, and I will run with it. And Richie, I do want to ask you real quick, because one thing that Mike pointed out about the Coyotes drafting, you said it very well, I think 3 or 4 episodes ago. The Coyotes focus on their scouts, especially in Europe. So you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of just show how your brain works.
Oh, goodness. I don't really know too much how to I'm not too sure where to go with on that point, but I was just pointing out that like a lot of their scouts and stuff like that, especially like the pro scouts for picking up free players, like they've done a really good job at just finding these guys that can come in and be role players. You know, obviously the most notable is Karel Vejmelka, who is their starting goaltender. You know, call it what you will, whether he's an actual starter or not. Like this is a guy who they just picked up for free out of I think it was the Czech league or something like that, and that was just off of a scout who was just like, yeah, give this guy a shot. I like what he's got. And
Vejmelka is a starter. I'm going to say it right now. I mean, we watched this guy last year. He was a different kind of goaltender last year. He was a goaltender who could steal games. This year, he's a lot more consistent. He very seldom has those big blow-up games where he lets in 6 or 7 that we saw a couple times last year. This is a guy who is keeping the Coyotes consistently in games, who is making, if he faces 30 shots, he's going to make 27 or 28 saves. It's just the case pretty much every night. And no, I think right now, Vejmelka, if he keeps up this play, I want to see him get Vezina votes. I'm serious. Like, he's playing now. I mean, even Dom had him in his Vezina top 10 list. He was in his top 5. He was, I think, 4th. So, I mean, I think he is playing, he's playing extremely well. I think he is the reason, a big reason why this team isn't last or close to it. It's almost at the point where Vejmelka, you know, I think he's such a good goaltender, and it might be a little bit controversial, but he is, you know, a little over 2 years away from unrestricted free agency. This is a guy who I think eventually, you know, depending on the rebuild timeline, you might start to look at in a move. I think this is a guy who you might start to look at and say, is there a team out here who is desperate enough to give us another first-round pick for this guy?
Yeah.
We were actually talking about that, I think, a week or 2 ago, because we were joking, because to start the season, he was still a little 50-50 like he was last year. So I'm like, you know, he's at least consistent in that regard. He's good enough to steal you a few games. He's not good enough to Darcy Kemper you to the playoffs. But hey, that's still a good goaltender you got for free. But with how much more consistent he's been, I want to say at least over the last 2.5, 3 weeks, somewhere in there, and he's kind of stolen the start job without having to play on pace for 75 games or whatever the hell his pace would have been last year, the equivalent. We're looking at it like, if we want to get top 3 pick, because the Coyotes need top 3. I don't care. I would love Fantilli. Bedard is a beast. We never get first overall, so I'm still focused on Fantilli. But if we want to get a top 3 pick, maybe you consider trading Vejmelka because of just how damn good he's been.
Yeah, I think Vejmelka, you know, I want to see more out of Connor Ingram. I think Ivan Prosvetov has been a really good story so far in the American League this year. He's finally looking like the goalie prospect who I think the Coyotes want him to be. And I think the goalies they've drafted recently have not been necessarily the guys who I would project. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know a whole lot about a lot of them yet to this point. But, and I mean, 2022 was a terrible year for goalies in the draft. You know, I mean, no disrespect to any of the guys who were drafted, but it just was not a good year for goaltending prospects. So, but yeah, with Vejmelka, I mean, I think there is an inflection point between a guy who is the stopgap and the starter of the future. And it just has to be, I mean, I find these teams, I mean, you look at Darcy Kemper, who was the goaltender who came in at the right time for the Avalanche, and he was only there for a year. I find goaltending, I think, is the piece that comes last with a contending team.
Which is so funny because it's like one of the most important, right? Isn't the saying like
exactly
like forwards will win you games, defensemen will win you series, and then goaltending will win you championships? And it's like the most overlooked position.
But you look at it. You look at the last
because it's so inconsistent. Like the best goaltender in 2017 is not the best goaltender in 2020. Like even just 3 years later, even the top 5 changes too frequently. Like goaltending is such a fickle position. I do not envy goaltending coaches. I've said it before on the show. I do not envy goaltending scouts. I do not envy the prospects themselves.
No, it's difficult because, like, you look at it, you really need, if you're gonna build around a goaltender, he needs to be a Vasilevsky, or he needs to be a Shesterkin, or he needs to be an Ilya Sorokin, or one of those types of guys. And those guys are exceedingly, vanishingly rare. They are not the guys who you're going to find. And most, you look at the Stanley Cup winning teams the last 20 years, and I would say probably half of them, their starter was a guy they picked up off the street halfway through the year. Guy, like, it's the truth. I mean, you look at Cam Ward in Carolina, or you look at Jordan Binnington in St. Louis. You look at Kemper, who they just traded for in the summer before. I mean, it just happens.
My favorite, Antti Niemi for Chicago when they won their first cup. That's my go-to every time. Or
even, Edmonton got Dwayne Rollison for, I don't even know what they traded for him halfway through that year to Minnesota. Calgary almost won in 2004, getting Mika Kiprusoff, who was San Jose's third-string goaltender going into that season. They gave him a second-round pick that turned into Mark-Edward Vlasic. Mike Smith coming in out of nowhere to be a .940 goaltender in the playoffs for Phoenix back in 2012. These goaltenders, I mean, that's the thing. So I think with Karel Vejmelka, I think he is an outstanding goaltender. I think he's a quality person to have in this locker room. I think he is a player who you like to have. And I think he is a success story for the management and the scouting team. And I think the way you turn him into a long-term success story is ultimately going to be, you have to make that judgment call. You have to say, is this the guy who we want to lock in at 6 years for whatever? Because the moment you do that, the prospect of trading goes out the window. You cannot trade Karel Vejmelka at 6 years for whatever, for $5 or $4 million.
Yeah,
that's a difficult contract to trade right away. And I think, you have to make that judgment call. Are you going to lock yourself into this guy and know you're going to have him around for another 2-3 years? You've lost the opportunity cost of being able to trade him. Or do you want to pick up another first-round pick? Do you want to make yourself have that base of assets that can keep replenishing itself as you move into the new Tempe Arena, as you build this young core? Because you can find 9-15 goaltending for 1 year on the street. It is something that, you might not reliably be able to find it. But even in their early years of contention, the Flames were just grabbing guys like Brian Elliott, who they shouldn't have. But they were grabbing guys like Brian Elliott and Jonas Hiller and Mike Smith, just totally willy-nilly. And, they got Jacob Markstrom eventually. But, it's just been a case of goaltending is the thing you need last. And so that's where, if I'm the Coyotes, and they just came off a draft year where they made 3 first-round picks. And you know what? Frankly, I think they should be doing all they can to make 2 first-round picks this year, if they can.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to be able to do it by trading Vejmelka. Probably not this year because the 2023 draft is expected to be so good.
Yeah.
But 2024 maybe. And there's also another point that I want to bring up, and I know I've asked Craig about it at points, but what is going to happen with Nick Schmaltz?
Yep. Well, we've said it on this show already. Yeah. We said that with Nick Schmaltz when he got injured in that first game. We were like, man, he can't stay healthy. Like, he's a good player. He's a really good player. He's a zone entry god, but he can't stay healthy, man. It is
it comes down to, like, if I'm offered a good enough trade package or even just good enough assets, I'd move on. Not because I hate Nick Schmaltz, bad player. No, good player. great for the locker room. One of Keller's best friends, really good natural chemistry with him and Keller. They've also been building for years. But the fact is, if he can't stay healthy, that shows you for his entire tenure in Arizona that when you're ready to make that push, if he's a guy you're relying on, you can't. Unfortunately, and it's not him as a person; it's just the asset. And if they can move on from him, I would love it. We talked about it last week. Funny enough, it was a bit of a meme proposal where we're like, you know what, if Austin Matthews, as soon as his no trade clause kicks in, at the start of next season, says I'm not re-signing, I only want to go to Arizona, we will trade you a very lightly used Nick Schmaltz and whatever the hell.
Yep. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing that I think you're under no pressure to trade Nick Schmaltz because of the contract that he has, which I liked from day one. I liked that contract. A lot of people didn't. I thought it was a very good signing by John Chayka, who I always thought got a bad rap in terms of his contract extensions. I liked the Keller signing from day one as well. And even the Christian Dvorak signing. But I thought Schmaltz would grow into it, and I think it's safe to say that he has. I think he's a bargain, frankly, at what he does. If he was a healthy player, that money would be, oh my goodness, we'd be talking about it like it was one of the best contracts in the league. And I think you have him for another 3 years after this one, and those are 3 big years. I mean, ideally, by the time you're into that last year, you got a pretty good team going here, and you're ready to move into the new arena. And he's a guy who will be 29, and again, that's another point where you make that judgment call. His trade value takes a bit of a hit this summer, but not a huge hit. It's only a 10-team no trade list, and really, I mean, the teams that he's going to put on there are probably the teams that wouldn't want to trade for him anyway. It seems like Anaheim, the really bad teams. I don't know, but
Winnipeg consistently is on that list.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But I think Nick Schmaltz is the type of player who's a tremendous asset for any team. I think he's a very movable player. I thought when Elliott was talking a couple of years about the Coyotes thinking about buying him out, I thought it was one of the most ludicrous things I'd ever heard. I thought this is a guy who you can see the skill whenever he has the puck. He is one of the most skilled players this team has had in recent memory, I think, just in terms of pure ability with the puck. And I think no matter which team he ends up going to, I mean, Calgary's a team that could sure use a good goal-scoring right winger. They'd have to make the money work, but I think he's going to be a huge asset, and I think even if the Coyotes keep him, he's a guy who I would pay to go see.
Yeah, because he is good. He's a good player.
He's a really good player.
He can't stay on the ice, so it's like if you are, because this team is definitely ahead of schedule. How much so? No idea. I think trying to predict it right now might be dumb because if they take a step back next year, there you go. You're not ahead of schedule anymore.
Now, I just want to say one thing as it pertains to Schmaltz, and I do think it's a reality with this ownership group. I don't have any strong feelings about this ownership group. I think they're just like any other NHL ownership group in a lot of respects, other than the money thing sometimes. But I think there is a reality that we have to look at where with Nick Schmaltz, he is owed a lot of money over the next 3 seasons after this one. It's just the reality of the situation is his base salary goes up $3 million after this year. He's being paid $4.5 million this year. After this year, it goes up to $7.5 million, and then 8.45, and then 8.5. So that is a huge backloaded deal, and that's, I think, something that has to be considered.
Yeah, that has to be considered. I think if I'm just going to use Toronto as an example because they have infinite money. For a team like Toronto,
exactly.
I don't think it would matter. But for another small market team that like the Coyotes, you definitely want to be saving money where you can and having as much as possible payable by insurance if someone's on LTIR.
That's what I meant, is that I think there might be some impetus, even this season, because, after this year, there is that point where both the NTC kicks in and the salary goes up. It's just something you got to think about. I think maybe in June, we come to the point where, there's some talk about, can the Coyotes get, another couple of second round picks and a really good prospect for this guy? Or Can they get a future first round pick, and can they get somebody else for this guy? I think that's something where maybe you have to start listening. For now, though, I mean, it's just a joy to watch Keller and Schmaltz go at it every night. And when they got Chychrun on the ice with them too, I mean, it just turns into, it really gives the Coyotes a dominant trifecta on the ice that we don't see all that often.
I mean, literally, if them playing well this stretch would have convinced Chychrun to rescind the trade request, I would have been like, I'm not judging at all. Stay, you dominant defenseman, you. But unfortunately, that situation hasn't changed. But with
I think the Chychrun trade request is a blessing. I'm just going to say it up front. I think it is going to force the Coyotes' hand to make a move that they should make that they might not have made. And I think that he is playing extremely well. I think he is likely going to keep playing this well. We've seen him play, he's a lethal player from the point. He's got an outstanding shot. He's the kind of player who in theory is the guy you want to build around. He's got an incredible contract. I just think if you try to build around this player, I don't think he's the right number one for a team to build around. I think you're going to run into some problems. And I think the assets that you can get that will supplement your future core are in the long run going to be more valuable because, you got a piece who's not going to resign with you. That. So really he's only a 3-year piece. And I think the injuries are enough of a concern for me where I start to wonder, in 3 or 4 years, I mean, we saw it in Calgary with Sean Monahan, who suffered a lot of injuries, and the signs were there early. And if the Calgary had been able to trade him maybe 3 or 4 years earlier than they did, they would have been able to get a windfall for Sean Monahan. And they ended up holding on to him, and they had to give up a first-round pick to get rid of him, just because he was a player who went downhill with injuries fast, and his contract went from being very reasonable to very untenable. And so I have a worry with Chychrun. I think he's playing extremely well right now. A contending team should be all over him. But my worry is that by the time the Coyotes are ready to be that good team, he might not be that player anymore.
Well, actually, Richie, this is one of our first big hockey-related conversations when we first became friends, talking about Chychrun, where he's had surgeries on both of his knees. Correct?
Both knees have had surgeries pre-22, I think, age 22. You look at that and you go, man, what's the longevity of his career having significant knee surgeries? And, I talked to Craig Morgan about this at a bar. We were watching one of the Stanley Cup final games against the Blues and Boston. And he's like, oh, I wouldn't really worry about it because he's still young and like you can still grow or you can still heal properly when you're young. But like, I don't know, time and time again, I see it and I'm just like, man, that's significant. It's not just, I broke my hand or, my ankle kind of hurts. Significant knee. I think it was ACL, MCL surgery. I want to say on both knees. That's pretty significant. I don't think it was both, but I'm saying like ACL or MCL. Not both of them were destroyed in both knee.
Right. I don't think it's an indictment of Chychrun at all. I just think it's bad fortune, and I think it is something where it's just something you got to consider going forward. This player has been through a lot. He's a heck of a player right now. For what he can bring to a contending team. He's going to command a very good return if the Coyotes, when the Coyotes pull the trigger on that deal, and I do think it's going to be pretty soon. But I think ultimately it's going to be a win-win situation if they do it this year. I think it's going to give the Coyotes what they need. It's going to give another team what they need in terms of the player they're acquiring. The team that intrigues me is Buffalo. I've got a few friends in Buffalo. Yeah,
I mean, for Chychrun, 1-for-1. Let's go.
The Buffalo's got so many pieces. Just the one thing they don't have is the defenseman that they would be able, the young defense prospect who they'd be willing to send back. They just don't have that piece. I mean, the guy who I could maybe see is Ryan Johnson. But even then, if you can't sign Ryan Johnson, he turns into a second-round pick for you. We saw that with Connor Bleakley when he was in the Alex Tanguay trade. But I think with the Sabres, he makes a lot of sense there, is giving them some more insurance with Samuelson and Power and Darlene.
Yep.
And I think the pieces that they could send back, I mean, if you're talking about getting Peyton Krebs in a deal or getting, I don't even know. They got so many good pieces.
Well, didn't they get Matthew Savoy in this year's draft?
They did get Matt Savoy. I don't think they'd move Matt Savoy. I don't think so, but I think they made a couple of first round picks this year. They've got a lot of good prospects in Buffalo, and they just got a lot of pieces who they can move. I think they drafted 3 first round picks this year.
Yeah,
They drafted
Ostlin,
and Yuri Kulich. And even looking last year with Isaac Rosen, I think he's a guy you could even target. They drafted him 14th overall, one spot after the Flames got Matt Coronado, and Isaac Rosen has been in the American League this year, and he's had a really good start. So I think the Sabres make a lot of sense. But my main concern, and obviously you have JJ Moser, who's been really good this year. You got Valimaki, who's a little bit older, but he looks like a guy you can re-sign. I just think, the Coyotes, I think they need to draft best player available no matter what going forward, but they got to get some defense in this pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Elite level defense, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Maverick Lemeru, I mean, he's a guy who I think is a very interesting project, but I don't think he's projectable. I think he's not very projectable. Not many guys of his size have made it. He's a guy who you'll hope for, but he's not a guy who I don't think he's a guy you can necessarily bank on. He's a guy who you really hope makes it, but he's not the guy who will play NHL games for you, because there's a chance he doesn't. There's a chance this is a guy who completely flames out, and so they need to get some defense in here, because even Victor Soderstrom is. What is that guy going to be?
Soderstrom. They need to honestly just, sell as high as they can with Victor Soderstrom and get him the hell out of the system.
You want to know my favorite story about Soderstrom is so the reason they moved up in that draft. This is what I've heard rumbling wise. It may not be true, but the reason they moved up in that draft, allegedly in that draft, the reason they moved up was because they were behind Minnesota, and they moved up past Minnesota so that they could draft Soderstrom, because Minnesota wanted Soderstrom. And they literally moved up one spot before them to steal Soderstrom out from under them. And you could see it when they drafted him up at that table. Minnesota looked just absolutely decimated that they lost out on that pick. Like, you could see at their table, they were just like so upset about this. And then Minnesota went on to draft Matthew Boldy.
Who went 2 picks later? No other than Gould Caulfield?
Yeah, and then
the player, I literally got 5K views in a video that I made, just being the Coyotes could have taken Gould Caulfield. We need 30 goal scorer type players. We need those top NHL shot type players in this system. And we got Gunther, that's great. But imagine a scenario in which it took Caulfield a couple extra years, and we still end up getting Gunther, and he got both of them.
Yeah,
that was a big miss.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying that.
My take was.
Go ahead, Mike.
You go.
Okay, when they drafted Dylan Gunther, he was a guy who I had in my top 3. He was a guy who I thought was going to be a projectable, reliable NHL scorer very quickly. Cole Caulfield was an obvious miss by so many teams. I mean, you look at it, but the Coyotes wanted a defenseman, and that draft is littered with bad defense picks. That draft, I mean, that was just not a year to draft a defenseman. I mean, you look at all the defensemen picked in that first round, and the only guy who's really, I mean, you got Seider and you got Byram at the very top. And beyond that, it goes Broberg, Soderstrom, Cam York, Thomas Harley, Lassie Thompson, Ville Heinola, Tobias Bjornfot, and Ryan Johnson. There's not a single top 4 guy among them. Yep. Those are all first-round picks. And it's just holy mackerel. That was not a year to draft a defenseman. A lot of misses there. I mean, even if you go into the second rounds, I mean, it's just not a good year. And so I think, hey, Vlad Kolyachonok, remember him? I mean, he's still kicking around, isn't he? Oh, man. But I think Victor Soderstrom, I don't think he's done. I don't think he's done as a prospect. I think he will get looks when they trade Troy Stetcher, when they do whatever they need to do at the deadline. but he's got a lot of work to do. I mean, you look, JJ Moser drafted 2 years later, he's already passed him. Yusuf Alamaki claimed on waivers has already passed him. There's guys who don't make it, and Soderstrom is disappointing so far. And it's to the point where I think you made a good point. I would look at trade options. I don't know what kind of market there's going to be. I don't know if it's a trade or he's a throw-in almost. Like I don't even know.
That's what I would guess.
He is
like a sweetener to get something done.
That's the thing, though, is that like he's the kind of guy who you would move if you were looking to add something, and the Coyotes aren't really in that position. Like maybe you. I mean, it's almost what they need right now is another team to have a Chychrun who they want to trade, and the Coyotes need to get that guy and trade Soderstrom in a deal for that guy. But they're the team with the Chychrun that they're looking to move.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of in reverse, and so. He's an interesting one. I haven't given up on him as a prospect. I don't think he is. I certainly don't think he is, a bust or anything like that. But I just think there needs to be a lot more shown.
Well, I'm going to ever so slightly disagree. Not like with the overall point, but I just want to talk about why I think the Coyotes definitely should be trying to get out from under Soderstrom. It's not that he's done. He's never going to be an NHLer. He is getting a little bit of offense back. 9 assists so far in 18 games with Tucson. That's up, from last year around this pace. So that's should be good. He's getting a little better. Right shot defensemen always have a bigger market because they're right shot defensemen. I don't know what it is about them. I think it's scarcity. I think that this is the kind of player that you can trade. I'm just going to use Phillips as an example for a Matthew Phillips type where it's, hey, we might lose this guy. Hey, we don't really know if this guy's going to make it. Maybe a change of scenery works. Or maybe, like you said, use it as a sweetener. I don't really know. But I think that's a guy you also could just trade by himself. I just don't know if you'd be selling high or low there, depending on if he busts, you're selling high getting a Phillips type. If he blooms, you're probably selling low.
Yeah, well, who I even look at as being a guy who you could maybe get is the guy who was picked one spot ahead of him. And Vasily Podkolzin. I mean, he's a guy who's played a whole year in the NHL, but he's back in the American League right now. He's struggled. He has not been what the Canucks were hoping for so far. I think, I think Phillips is a little bit in a different category right now in terms of he's so close to UFA. He's a bit of an interesting story in that he is very unique. I think Soderstrom is more value. I think you can aim maybe a little bit higher even. And it sounds strange to say when you're talking about the AHL's leading goal and point scorer, but I think in terms of, even a guy, I don't even know, like another guy who was drafted in 2019 or 2018. I mean, honestly, the guy who you could maybe even look at him if there was another team out there with their own version of Barrett Hayton, something like that, or just and you know what I mean. And Hayton's another guy who I don't think is done. I think Hayton has a lot more to show.
Oh, you should hear my stand on that one before the before the season started. I was going for 50 points, and I'm not looking too hot on that one so far.
I was a little more conservative. I wanted about 30. Because I just want steps forward with him, because if he solidifies as a third line center, I'm happy. Not because, that's 5th overall value, but because we have the player, you already drafted him, you can get something useful out of him. That's not going to satisfy everyone else.
Here's my logic on why I had him that high before I get dumped on here. The reason I went with that is, one, he waited to get a contract right before the training camp started, so he's a very motivated player. We saw that in preseason. He had 2 points per game in preseason, and he looked very motivated in scoring, and then all of a sudden it just disappeared once we got into the regular season. So I made that prediction when I saw the 2 points per game pace that he was on in preseason. I was like, obviously he's not going to make that work in the NHL in a regular base, obviously, but that's why I was aiming for 50 points, and I'm not looking so hot on that one.
Barrett is doing some good things. I think he is getting shafted in terms of production. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Lawson Krause a couple of years ago. Just that he's he does a lot of good things. He's never going to be a top 6 center, I don't think. He's going to be, I mean, yeah, and I mean, I say that Lawson Krause, there's a case to be made that he's a second line winger at this point. I think he's on that cusp of being a second, third line guy, who on a good team, on this Coyotes team, obviously he's a second line guy. But like, I think Barrett is going to have that production come. I don't think he's been bad. I know there are a lot of Coyotes fans too who think he's been bad. I think he has been serviceable. I think that there's a way where a couple of those point shots bounce in off him, and he's got 2 or 3 goals already. Like, I think he is taking some shots. He's going to be, I would rather see him continue to play than a guy like Liam O'Brien, quite frankly. But I think you got to give him a little bit more time. But we're coming up on a period here where, you got to start seeing some results. But a guy, okay, so I'm going to make a statement here. A guy who I think the Coyotes could look for, and it could be in a Soderstrom trade, could be in something else. I'm going to say it right now. Remember this name. We'll see if it comes through. Joe Veleno.
Okay.
Explain
your Detroit. Joe Veleno was very highly regarded.
Yeah, he was just to give some context, he was a player who had exceptional status in the juniors. Exceptional status is really hard to come by. We're looking at what John Tavares, Connor McDavid, just to name a few exceptional status plays.
Couple other guys. Yeah, I think Joe Veleno is another one of those guys who you could look at as saying this is a guy who has struggled at times to make an impact at the top level. He's a big center. I know Bill Armstrong likes his big centers.
Yep.
He has some strong American League production. He's only 22. He's going to turn 23 in January. He's a guy who I don't think fits into Detroit's long-term plans right now. He was not a Steve Yzerman draft pick. And I think he fits in a lot of ways into a guy who is in a similar boat as Victor Soderstrom, in being a guy who has pedigree, a guy who is a little bit older than Soderstrom, but was drafted lower, but also has more NHL track record. That's a guy who I would keep an eye on. I'm just going to say it. Could be totally out of the woods, totally out to lunch, but I just think that could make some sense.
Trade Makes opportunity there if they're both struggling. Side note, I just want to get my opinion out there on Soderstrom, just so for your reference. I like a lot of little things. I think he's good defensively in his own zone. I like how he passes. I think he's very good in the faceoff dot. I just don't think you're getting the scoring. That's it. I think if he had between 2 and 5 goals right now, I don't think anyone would be complaining about him. And a lot of that comes down to bounces. There is realistic possibility or scenario where it could have been 2 or 3 goals by now. But I think the trade make the most sense there. Wouldn't that be a Hayton for Veleno swap? Because hey, you have 2 struggling centers. Let's just change the scenery, see if they can make something. I feel like if we could sell even slightly higher on Soderstrom, you move that to a different team. I think Detroit,
maybe what
a right shot defenseman.
Maybe I could totally see that one too. It's. I just think these reclamation project type trades, they're interesting, and I think the Coyotes are going to make a couple of them pretty soon here because.
Sorry, continue.
Oh, I just think they've got some players who are on the verge of being passed here. They're going to keep drafting guys. They already have Cooley and Geeky coming up pretty soon. Cooley, I would be surprised if he's not in the lineup at the end of the year if he doesn't sign. I mean, or if he signs out of Minnesota, which I don't think he's going back as a sophomore. I don't think he has any reason to, frankly. But
he doesn't want to play more than 1 year, which makes me sad. Exactly. I want them to transfer to ASU and play with Donor for a year, but that's my piece.
Yeah. I don't think that'll happen, my guy.
You're going to get another center coming in already, and so you're going to have to make some room. I mean, you got Jack McBain, who you are very content playing in those bottom 6 minutes because he's got that big frame. Where does Barrett Hayton fit in? It's going to be a case where you got to make some concessions here.
The guy that I've been looking at eyeballing for Barrett Hayton is the guy who is also in his same draft year, who's picked four spots later in Vitaly Kravtsov. He's a guy who kind of interests me. Hasn't really gotten a shot because the Rangers love to just destroy their draft picks their prospects, i.e. Lafreniere. Yeah, that's a guy who I'd be kind of curious about taking a look at. Turning.
Kravitsov scored last night. He played
Yeah.
for the Rangers last night and he scored. He's played some games. He's a guy who's, I guess he scored a couple nights ago, but he's an interesting player too. He hasn't taken a whole lot of shots in his games this year, but he also hasn't played a lot. I think Gallant isn't necessarily the coach for those young players. I think he's a little bit Rick Tockety in some respects.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we could go all day about this. I just think I think it's the sort of thing where eventually that trade is going to happen. And yeah, it's going to be interesting when it does. Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense because, and I was saying it, Richie was saying it, I think last year, a couple years ago, is GMs like, I'll rephrase this, they like having their own property. They don't like having, the couch left behind by the old GM. So a lot of the times there's prospects that, you know what, I didn't draft you. I really don't think you fit in, or I really don't know if you fit in. I don't really care all that much. It could also hurt that specific prospect. So also if we can trade Hayton and Soderstrom and get some value for them, and they also end up thriving wherever they're at, great. But it would also make a lot of sense to want to get rid of the last couple like Chaika era picks if you don't see that Chaika era as being any part of your vision. And I see that usually happens a lot with new GMs kind of getting rid of the old GM's picks if they don't think they fit in.
Yeah, really. I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised in a couple of years if the only guys who are still here from that reign are, your Michellis and your Ben McCartneys. And boy, I don't even know. Jan Yannick. I mean, Ivan Prosvetov. But it's not, I mean, Keller, obviously. But it's just yeah, it is something that happens.
I know
it's strange for me to say is
I know I know he wasn't a draft pick, but obviously Krause as well. He was a trade for a bad contract, but he meshes really well with what Bill Armstrong's trying to build in being a big skillful forward.
I think it's pretty safe to say that Bill Armstrong doesn't want to get rid of the guy who he just signed to his biggest ever contract. So
yep.
By far his biggest ever contract as GM.
Yeah,
more than 20 million.
Armstrong is really tight with the purse. I know it's because he wants to keep the cap nice and flexible. So that way you can see, okay, these are the players you're going to want to keep. How are we going to fit them in the cap and also have room for other players? I know for a fact the Coyotes still have an interest in getting Austin Matthews. All 31 other teams have an interest in getting Austin Matthews' services. So, of course, if you can position yourself with a rebuild right around his free agency period, hey, let's see if we can just free up that cap space, keep it free. But I'll be curious to see when he actually starts handing out the big contracts, what they actually look like. Because eventually they're going to have to happen. I just don't know if they're going to be... Yeah, that's still pretty cheap for an NHL contract, or if he's going to blow the bag.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. That is a conversation I wanted to have at some point because, you look at the guys who are coming up after this year. Obviously, Richie's going to get traded. Gostisbehere's going to get traded. But I'm looking at guys like Matthias Michelli, and I'm looking at guys like Juuso Välimäki, and those are two of the most interesting contract negotiations I can think of right now because. With Michelli, you can't give him the moon after one season. Mm-hmm. I mean, it depends on how much he produces. I think you're looking at a 2 or 3 year deal for him and for Välimäki, quite frankly. I mean, Juuso is 24. He'll be 24 throughout the year, so you can give him 2 years and he'll still be a restricted free agent at the end of it. So I think 2 years is the sweet spot for Juuso. I think with Juuso. He is currently making 1.55. I think, you maybe look at giving him 2 times 2 or 2.5, something there. With Michelli, I mean, that's one where I'm really curious, I think. And something else, come July 1st, you're going to be eligible to sign Moser to an extension.
Yeah.
So that's something where, yeah, that is something where I'm really curious about. You can even start looking at giving. I mean, I don't even know what they're going to give Jack McBain. I mean, he's going to be an RFA. So,
Yep.
these aren't the big pieces. This isn't like Dylan Gunther coming up after his ELC. This isn't like Clayton Keller or Nick Schmaltz needing to get re-signed. But these are going to be really fascinating pieces of business. And it's going to be really telling to see which of these pieces Bill Armstrong views as being potential pieces of his core. This is going to be one of those telling summers where, yeah, no holds barred. I'm really curious.
We all know the most important RFA is Christian Fisher. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I
you got to
my
give
case.
his 5-year deal. But no, I
Yes.
think if we can get Yuso for a 2.5x2, I think that's fine. I'm with how well he's meshed with the defense, I wouldn't mind going longer, but I could understand you don't want to be like me where you like just signing 8-year contracts in NHL 22 and that's just your roster for the next decade. But for
With
Michelli, if he keeps producing the way he is, I could see 4 million. I don't know for how long, because it also depends on how much more offense he produces. Because he kind of looked at Tournier with his play in the preseason and said, "Yeah, you're not sending me down." He kind of looks at
no,
Tournier on the ice and says, you can't keep me in the bottom 6. I got to get more time." And it's like, I think maybe a 3-year contract would make sense, but
yeah,
I feel like he could get upwards of 4 depending on how much he keeps producing. I think for a guy like McBain, you just give a 1x1, give him a little bit of a
yeah.
raise. That should be fine. But I really want to know what the Gunner is gonna get when he's off his ELC. I want to know if you're gonna even have room for AM34 if you wanted to. I know they would because we're still right at that cap floor. They did a good job giving themselves all the space, but I'm gonna be so interested to see where everyone lands because they're not gonna get if Gunther is a 30-goal scorer consistently, you're not getting him for like 7 million a year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a long way to go. We got to see a lot more. But with Matias Michelli, if he finishes around 50 points, it's going to be hard to get him for under 4 million. I mean, it's just going to be, that's a guy who is going to be saying, "I'm established myself. I'm a core piece now, and you got to pay me." And I think it's going to be something where you'll have a bridge deal for him. I think with Yuso, his injury history is a big one. Where I think 2 years, I don't think I would go longer. It's natural for player and team. I think at this point, where 2 years shows some loyalty, it shows some appreciation for what you've done, but it also isn't saying we're not going to walk you to UFA. We're not going to risk committing to a player who has had a whole lot of knee issues, who has had ankle issues. There's Yuso has been through a lot, and so I think 2 years is a pretty good show of faith for a guy who was just on waivers. Matias, yeah, that's the big one. That's going to be, and then Moser. I mean, you know what? JJ Moser, the sky's the limit. And I can totally see the Coyotes saying, we want to get this guy done right now. If he gets to 40 or 50 points, I mean, holy mackerel. This is a guy who could be your next. I joked about him being the next Roman Josi before the season, but he's just such an exciting player. I think he is the best defense prospect who has come through this team in 6 years.
Since
I definitely think that if this stays consistent, and honestly, there's nothing to tell me that it wouldn't stay consistent. I don't care if it might sound foolish. I'd give a 6 or 8-year contract. I would lock that up as my core top 4 defense. He could probably be your top defenseman depending on who else you bring in. And there's a lot of the Zbigniew McCulloch vibes where he's really good in his own zone. But I forgot. And I think a lot of people also forget about Young Z. Young Z also put some pucks in the net. Young Z also was pretty good at moving the puck around on the power play. Where it's like, look, that's a guy that I think should be a cornerstone. I would get it done 6 to 8 years if this continues. But that's also because I'm insane. I'm really high on Yanis Moser.
The guy who Moser reminds me of a little bit is Rasmus Anderson here in Calgary, and they showed some faith in Anderson a couple of years ago. They gave him a 6-year deal when he was coming off his ELC. They signed him 6 years at 4.5, and that contract right now looks absurdly good. He's got 17 points in 24 games this year. He had 50 points last year, and when they signed him in January 2020. And he had played one full season and he'd played one half season at that point. And it was a contract they signed where they knew they were banking on the future. This was a draft pick they believed in. And, his analytics were, they were okay. And it was a contract they signed knowing he would grow into it. And I think with Moser, he's coming up to a time where I think he's in a very similar spot. Go for it. That's a contract where if you can get him 6 or 7 years at 4.5, give him that opportunity to grow into it. I think he's a player who you can absolutely make that bet on.
I even go as high as 5, but I feel like I don't want to push it too much. You still have to be cautious of your cap in the future. But I feel like if it does take that extra little $500,000 to get it done, I would do it.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, especially if you're moving on from Nick Schmaltz, right? Like we're talking about, like that's $6 million off the books right there.
You'd still be saving money by you're swapping out Schmaltz's contract for Janis Moser's contract.
And the funny thing is, I think if you go up to a whole lot of media people in Toronto right now, and you talk to them, and you talk to even hockey analytics people, and you say, "What do you think of JJ Moser and Matias Maccelli?" I think you could say at least a third of them, maybe half of them, would have no idea who you're talking about.
Yep.
I'm serious.
Yep.
These are guys they're so off the radar. But I think, for people who have followed them over the years, I've followed them. I think you guys have followed them. I think they have the potential to be cornerstone players. I really do. And they're pieces who I think are really interesting. And they need that center. They needed him to come at some point. Might be Matthews, who knows? Might be Logan Cooley, might be Connor Bedard. But we'll see. I'm really intrigued.
Yep. And with that note, I've been trying to find a best way to wind this down. We're over the hour mark, so I know we could sit here and talk for.
I got you.
Matt, you will go for like 3 hours, so we gotta.
I know, but I
gotta cut you off.
Thing to end it on.
Okay.
To end this off.
All right.
So
end us off.
All right, Mike. I want a live reaction from someone who is not in the Arizona market on this. Did you know that since the Victoria Maple Leafs relocated to become the Phoenix Roadrunners,
I saw your tweet about this yesterday.
Toronto has not won a cup. Do you think that's any part of the reason why the Toronto fans seem to be desperate to get the Coyotes out of here? Because if they sign that 30-year no relocation, that is an entire new generation of Leafs fans that will never watch a Stanley Cup.
Just to humor you, I will say that is absolutely the reason.
Alrighty.
I had to get in somewhere this week. I had to.
Well, if you've made it this far into the episode, thank you so much for watching. I don't know why you made it this far. We just rambled the whole time, so I don't know why you're here. But if you're this far, you might as well give us a like, a follow, a subscription on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And if you are listening to us audibly on whatever platform, feel free to check us out on YouTube at Desert Moon Hockey. And that is where you'll find the video version of our podcast. Never understood why people like video versions of podcasts, but we do it anyways. So absolutely give us some love.
They need
thank
to
you.
See your face before bed, Richie. You know it. They got to see you. Anyway, thank you to Mike, who for whatever reason decided he's going to hang out with these two losers for an hour or so on a Sunday morning. We appreciate your time.
Yeah. Of course. Thanks for having me.
Mike, would you like to throw out your shout outs one more time?
Ooh, a double plug. All right.
A double plug, yeah.
On Twitter at Mike T. Gould, and I do some stuff all over the place. Go to dailyfaceoff.com.
All righty.
Sweet. Short, simple. I like it.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and we will see you next week.